I did not expect my boss's son to be charming, let alone disarming. I had seen him in photos, young, accomplished, sharp, but nothing prepared me for the man who stood at my doorstep that evening. I had invited him for tea out of formality obligation. But the way he looked at me, the way his eyes lingered as if they could read past every guarded layer I wore, I knew this evening would not remain polite. His presence was quiet but invasive, like heat rising in a room too slowly to notice until it is already too much. And I did not stop him. I had always drawn a line between work and personal life. That line for the most part had kept me balanced. My job demanded poise, boundaries, control, 3 things I had mastered over the years. I worked as a private project coordinator for an international firm, the kind where every meeting was layered in politics and every smile came with a subtext. My boss, Mr. Khanna, was an old-school professional, sharp, calculated, and utterly unreachable in personality. He rarely spoke of his family, though we all knew he had a son, Armin, who had returned from London after completing his MBA and was expected to take over a chunk of the business. I had heard the name many times, seen him once or twice in passing, always from a distance, never enough to remember his face, but just enough to carry a vague impression of youth, privilege, and quiet ambition. The invitation was casual. I had bumped into Mr. Khanna in the hallway that morning. He seemed slightly more human than usual, perhaps because of a long meeting that had just ended. Armin's curious about the coordination side, he had said, barely glancing at me. I told him he could learn a thing or two from you. He might drop by this evening. I blinked. Learn a thing or two from me. That in itself was an odd compliment, or maybe just a directive wrapped in corporate formality. Either way, it meant only one thing. Tea, politeness, a brief conversation, and another box checked on someone's spreadsheet. I had not put much thought into it until I saw the time. 6:17 p.m. I was home, barely changed out of my formal attire with my hair tied up, half a lipstick smudge still on my cup. There was a knock, not firm, not timid, measured. When I opened the door, the first thing I noticed was that he looked nothing like his father. Armin had warmth in his eyes, a smile that rested not on duty, but comfort. He was tall, yes, but it was his presence that struck me. Confident, but not arrogant, composed, but not stiff. I hope I am not too early, he said, and I found myself nodding, slightly thrown off by the calm texture of his voice. I let him in, gestured toward the living room, and excused myself to fix tea. But my hands were slower than usual. I kept glancing at the hallway where I could feel his quiet gaze follow the sound of clinking cups and boiling water. When I returned with a tray, he was already looking around, not intrusively, but with genuine curiosity. "You have a very peaceful home," he said. "It feels lived in real." That was the moment the first shift happened. Not in him, but in me. Because no one had said that to me in years. Not a client, not a colleague, not even the few friends I had. He noticed things that were not meant to impress, things that simply were. We sipped tea and talked about project timelines, vendor delays, how clients often ignored logic when pressure built. He was well informed, engaged, and far more perceptive than I had expected. But it was not what he said. It was how he said it. Armin had a way of listening that made even your smallest opinions feel like revelations. His attention was undivided, his focus sharp, as though nothing outside that moment existed. And somewhere in between explaining the nightmare of last year's logistics rollout and laughing about a failed overseas pitch, I realized he was inching closer, not physically, but emotionally, layer by layer. At one point, I noticed he had stopped sipping his tea. Instead, he was holding the cup, his thumb brushing against the rim slowly, rhythmically. His eyes were fixed on me, and I knew without any need for words that the conversation was no longer about business. The air had changed. It was thicker, more aware. My throat felt dry, my palms suddenly warm. I stood up pretending to clear the cups just to break the energy. But as I passed him, I felt his fingers lightly brush mine. Not intentional, not invasive, just enough to send a signal. He knew the tension, too. Back in the kitchen, I leaned on the counter, breathing in quietly, staring at the steam rising from the kettle. I told myself it was fine, that this was just a pleasant evening with a young man who was curious about work. But the moment I returned to the living room, I found him looking at a framed photo on my bookshelf. It was of me and my sister taken nearly 10 years ago. He smiled when he saw me watching. "You look different in this," he said. "Lighter, like life had not complicated you yet." I did not answer. I could not. The clock read 8:09 p.m. I should have offered to call him a cab. I should have said it was getting late, but I did not. I sat back down, this time closer, allowing the silence between us to grow heavier, denser, more electric. His leg brushed mine when he adjusted his position. I did not move away. He noticed, and that moment became the first real turning point. The unspoken acknowledgement that boundaries had shifted, that something simmered underneath the calm, polite surface we had so carefully maintained. And it was then, in the stillness, that he leaned just slightly forward, and said in a low, measured tone, "I hope I am not making this too complicated." I met his eyes, those steady searching eyes, and for the first time that evening, I let mine speak freely. "No," I whispered. "But you are making it impossible to ignore." His gaze held mine for a beat too long, long enough to send ripples through everything I had tried to keep still inside me. That silence after my words, "but you are making it impossible to ignore," was thick, trembling, and filled with something fragile but bold. Armin leaned back slightly, his fingers interlaced loosely in his lap, and exhaled like he was releasing a confession he had carried too long. "I did not expect this either," he said softly. "But here we are." The clock ticked quietly behind us. The tea had gone cold. The day had folded into night. And yet neither of us moved to end what had begun. Something neither reckless nor restrained, just incredibly aware. When I stood up, it was not to distance myself, but to breathe. The living room suddenly felt smaller. Or maybe I felt fuller, heavier with something I had not allowed myself in years. Desire, curiosity, connection. I walked toward the window and looked out into the soft city lights, needing space to think, but footsteps followed. I felt him stop behind me, close but respectful. "You do not have to say anything," he murmured. "I will not cross what you do not invite me to," and that his restraint was more intimate than a touch. I turned to face him, not stepping back, not shielding myself. "This is wrong. You know that, right?" I said, not asking, just stating the obvious. His smile was gentle. "What exactly is wrong?" he asked. "That I am younger, that I am your boss's son, or that for the first time in a long time, you are feeling something you told yourself you no longer needed?" The questions landed without pressure, but they cracked something open. I did not respond. I just stood there staring at this man who had walked into my home with nothing but a cup of tea in mind, and now stood before me, holding up a mirror to my loneliness. He reached out then slowly, giving me time to turn away if I wanted, but I did not. His fingers brushed my wrist, light as air. A trail of fire traveled up my arm. "I see you," he said, voice low, steady, "and I know you pretend not to need to be seen, but I do." His words dismantled me, not in a dramatic, reckless way, but in a quiet surgical manner, like he had identified the exact place where the ache lived and touched it without hesitation. When his hands cradled my face, I felt my eyes close involuntarily. It was not just affection. It was reverence, like he was touching someone. His kiss asked questions. "May I? Do you still want this? Will you allow yourself this moment?" And my body answered before my mind did. "Yes." 100 quiet yes, all unfolding at once. We moved together through the room. No words, just breath and connection. He guided me with care, hands never pushing, just following the rhythm we both discovered in silence. When we reached the edge of the couch, I sat down and he knelt before me, not in desperation, but with the intimacy of someone who wanted to be present, not overpowering. He tucked a strand of hair behind my ear and said, "You do not have to perform for me. Just be." And somehow that sentence undid everything I had spent years building. A facade of composure, a shield of maturity, a script of professional detachment. I let myself just be. The way he touched me was not transactional. It was exploratory, reverent. His fingertips trailed down my arms, mapping the skin like it was new terrain he wished to understand, not conquer. When he kissed my collarbone, it was not lust. It was gratitude. And when his lips met mine again, deeper this time, I matched him, not just physically, but emotionally. I let him into places I had walled off. I let him kiss the parts of me that had long forgotten what warmth felt like. The air between us crackled with unspoken affirmations. I want this. I choose this. I am not afraid tonight. There was something sacred in how he took his time. His hands did not claim me. They asked permission at every turn. And with each nod, each look I gave it, I gave in. His breath on my neck. The way he whispered my name, not out of habit, but like it was something rare, something worth holding. The small sighs that passed between us. The weight of his palm resting on my hip, grounding me. It was not about possession. It was about presence. He was here. I was here. And for once, I was not looking over my shoulder for judgment or guilt. Just the moment when he finally lifted me into his lap. It was not to dominate. It was to bring me closer. My knees folded beside him, arms wrapped around his neck, foreheads touching. We stayed like that for long minutes, breathing, listening to the hush of the night and the thump of our hearts. I have not felt this safe in a long time, I admitted. My voice trembled slightly, not even with myself. He kissed the corner of my mouth, not to silence me, but to acknowledge the weight of what I had said. Then let this be that space, he whispered. For however long it lasts, let it be safe. There were no fireworks, no dramatic declarations, just heat and softness, hands and mouths learning each other, skin brushing skin under dim lights. I remembered what it felt like to want and be wanted, to give and receive, to breathe without hiding. Every kiss he placed on my shoulder, every whispered word near my ear, it all told me something I had forgotten. I was still here, alive, desired, worth touching gently, worth holding carefully, worth feeling for. When it was over, we did not rush. He pulled me into his arms, and I curled into him like I had known him longer than the few hours we had shared. There was no promise of forever, no illusion that this would be anything more than what it was, but it was real and it mattered. I rested my head against his chest and we sat like that, quiet and raw, until the moonlight had shifted across the floor. And in that silence, I realized that something deeper than desire had just happened. I had not just crossed a line, I had reclaimed a piece of myself. Morning light poured into the living room, soft and indifferent, unaware of the emotional landscape it illuminated. I sat alone on the couch, still wrapped in the same blanket we had shared just hours before, though now it felt heavier somehow. Armin had left quietly, respectfully, as if knowing that what we had shared needed space to settle before either of us could speak of it. My hands gripped the teacup tighter than necessary, not because it was warm, but because it gave me something tangible to hold on to, while everything else inside me felt like shifting sand. The silence in the house, once comforting, now pressed against my chest with a weight I had not expected. Every minute since he had walked out the door carried the echo of what had transpired. The gentleness, the unexpected vulnerability, the way he had made me feel seen. But now doubt crept in like a slow-moving fog, the reality of who he was, my boss's son, and who I was, a woman who should have known better, gnawed at me from the inside. Was it a mistake, a lapse in judgment, or something far more complicated than a label could hold? I kept replaying his words, his touch, the look in his eyes when he said he saw me. Those things did not feel like mistakes. They felt terrifyingly real. Still, the world outside my apartment had not changed. It would not accommodate this new truth. There was work tomorrow, meetings, professional smiles, and the invisible line between personal and inappropriate. That line now felt like glass under my feet. Transparent, fragile, and capable of shattering at the slightest misstep. My phone buzzed. A message from Armin. You do not have to respond. I just wanted to say thank you for trusting me and I hope you are okay. Simple, thoughtful, and yet it twisted the knot of uncertainty tighter in my stomach. What did I want from this? Was it just one night of rediscovering something I thought I had buried? Or did I want to see him again to explore something more, however reckless that might be? Every instinct I had trained over the years screamed caution. But my heart, newly awakened, whispered something softer. What if it is not about the rules this time? What if it is about you? That thought scared me more than anything because I had not made decisions for myself in years. Everything had been measured, responsible, emotionally detached. And now I had to face the fact that something inside me wanted to break that cycle. The tension was not just about the consequences. It was about me, about what I had suppressed and denied in the name of maturity and professionalism. I had spent so long being composed, so long convincing myself I did not need touch or intimacy or connection. But one evening, one honest, unguarded night, had reminded me that I was still capable of feeling deeply. And now, in the wake of that emotional storm, I was left with pieces I did not know how to fit together. The image of Armin lingered like a scent on my skin. The curve of his smile, the warmth of his breath on my neck, the way his eyes searched mine as if waiting for permission not just to touch my body but to enter the guarded spaces of my soul. That was what made it complicated. It was not just physical. It was emotional. It had roots. And roots once planted demanded attention. But I did not know how to nurture them without risking everything I had worked so hard to keep stable. I paced the room, arms crossed, heart pounding. Was it selfish to want more? Was it foolish to consider seeing him again, not as an accident, but with intent? Could I handle what that meant? My boss, my career, my own fragile emotional balance. The answer did not come easy. It came with layers of guilt, excitement, fear, and longing all tangled into one. And beneath all of that, a voice whispered what I had tried to ignore. You felt alive. For the first time in years, you were not just existing. You were living. The doorbell rang. I froze. My heart jumped, then sank, then beat louder. I was not expecting anyone. I moved cautiously, peering through the peephole. It was him, Armin, standing there dressed casually, holding a brown paper bag and a hesitant smile. My breath caught in my throat. I hesitated for a moment, then opened the door. I know I said I would give you space, he said, voice soft, but I brought you breakfast. And I just wanted to make sure you were really okay. I nodded slowly, stepping aside to let him in, though my mind screamed conflicting things. Yes. No, stop. Wait. We sat across from each other again, just like last night. But everything was different now. The air felt denser, charged with unspoken questions. He handed me a cup of coffee and said nothing. That silence between us returned, not awkward this time, but contemplative. He finally broke it. If you regret it, say so. I can handle that. I will not make this harder for you. I looked at him, really looked. His expression held no arrogance, no assumptions, just quiet honesty. I do not regret it, I said carefully. But I do not know what to do with it. He nodded, accepting the truth. Then we do not do anything yet. We just sit with it. We take care of it. We do not rush or label or destroy it by overthinking. We just let it exist. His words calmed the storm inside me a little. He was not pushing for answers or declarations. He was offering patience, and that in itself made everything even more complicated. Because how do you resist someone who offers you not just passion but space to breathe? The tension did not ease, but it shifted from fear to curiosity, from guilt to grace. The emotional pressure remained, but it no longer felt like something pressing me down. It felt like something urging me forward, carefully, slowly, with caution, but forward nonetheless. I did not know where this would go. I did not know if I could protect everything I had built and still allow this thing with Armand to unfold. But I knew one thing. Pretending nothing had happened would be a greater betrayal than the risk of feeling too much. And so we sat there, not as boss's son and senior employee, but as two people caught in the complicated middle ground between longing and fear, passion and control. We said nothing more. We just shared coffee, shared space, and quietly acknowledged the truth between us that something had started. And neither of us knew how or if it would end. The days that followed were quieter, not because the storm had passed, but because we had both chosen not to rush its aftermath. Armin and I returned to our respective roles, professional, composed, and cautious. In the office, our interactions remained respectful, yet beneath the surface, a new awareness stirred. It was not loud or inappropriate. It was measured glances, soft nods, and the quiet understanding that something had changed, and we were both learning how to live with that truth. I did not tell anyone, not my colleagues, not even myself in the mirror, not yet. But every evening as I returned home and replayed our night together, I realized I no longer felt ashamed or conflicted. I felt awakened. What happened between us was not about rules broken. It was about walls lowered. It reminded me that I was still capable of connection, desire, and feeling something deeply human. Whether or not anything more would come of it no longer frightened me. It was enough to know that someone had seen me when I had long forgotten how to be seen. And in that recognition, I had begun to see myself again. If the story ended here, I would not regret it. If it continued, I would face it with open eyes. Either way, I had already been changed, not by scandal, but by honesty. And sometimes that is the most powerful transformation of